Well, we have a great lesson today. This is one of my favorites. This one that I've spent the most time thinking about since putting all these together. And I want to leave it. I want us not just to discuss it for this, and it's going to be a shorter one than normal. This one will be. But think about it. Think about it later. I urge everyone to. The title, Would You Do It Again? Would you do it again? And I think that this question is so important. It's a most interesting question for many reasons. And I think the way we answer that question will significantly affect us. So it's that important. James, would you do it all over again, knowing what you know now? This is so interesting to me. My answer, which has changed from time to time, 1 year ago, my answer was clearly yes, I would do it again. And when people would say, well, why? Number one, I needed the spiritual boot camp. We have pretty much laid it out that our church was more organized like a military than it was like a family. And by the way, there are Bible verses to substantiate both. But we were more of the military variety. And I needed a spiritual boot camp. I needed something, a structure with high accountability. That's just who I was. I mean, I believe had I never become a Christian, odds are really high that drugs would have played a much bigger role in my life. Sexual promiscuity, I can just about guarantee. Aggression. I was very aggressive. I was one of the few people in college football that was telling the players, don't you get it? This is the only time in life where we can go full speed and knock someone out unconscious, and it's okay. You will not get arrested. Try that a year after university. You're going to get locked up. This is the one chance we can do it, so let's do it. I was that aggressive, and I got in a number of fights in my earlier life, including in college. So, cheating. What's the odds I would have never cheated on my spouse? I'd have never become a Christian. The odds are small. How about physical abuse with my wife or kids? Well, I sure would like to think no, but I couldn't bet against that, given who I was. And now I've been married for 42 years. And this is one of the proudest things I can share. I live 3,000 miles apart from my only grandchild and my daughter and son-in-law. So they lived here in Clearwater, Florida. I was in Southern California. And the whole family begged me, can we just all be together, the family? Can we just do that? So you want me to leave Southern California? I love it here. And you want me to go to Florida? It's 3,000 miles. So that I can be closer to a son-in-law and a grandchild and my daughter. Yes. So finally I said, okay, I'm moving to Florida. Now, next question. How close do I need to live to you? I mean, is 30 minutes away okay? Because we were 40 minutes away from each other in LA before they moved here. And I thought, how about a different town? If you're in Clearwater, can I be in Tampa? I will still come over on Fridays, like we did, Friday nights, whatever you choose. And my daughters got together and said, no, Dad, same neighborhood. And Natasha said, same street. I want you to move and live on the same street where I live right now. Please. Let me put in a nice word about some people that I still love in the ICOC. When I called and told them this, everyone said, you got to go. Your daughters are begging you to live right there on the same street? You got to go to that one. I went, yeah, maybe. And they were all honest enough to say, I've got children that live in a lot of different states away from here. Never has one of them asked, can you move closer to me? Can you move in my town? Can you move on my street? And they told me so. And I thought that was humbling for them. And it made me realize I want to go. I want to be there. I ended up with a really close family. Sometimes I wonder, had both of my daughters gone into the church as preteens, what would be happening now? Would they be resenting me for not protecting them? Good. There's a lot of those kingdom kids are not so close to their parents. That's the one thing I read in their testimonials all the time. Would you do it again? 1 year ago, I said the best day of my life was October 8, 1978. That's the day I gave my life to Christ and the church. Best day of my life. And I would add that the second best day of my life was the day I left the church. I don't say that now. After listening to so many who were abused and hurt in our church, of which I was a leader, today my answer is no. I would not do it again. Knowing what I know now, even if I benefited greatly, too many people suffered to give me those opportunities. Let me pause there and turn it to you, Matt. What's your thoughts on what I've said? How do you answer the same question? Would you do it again knowing what you know now?
So knowing what I know now, I'm assuming what you mean is going back to being 20 years old,
Yes.
not knowing if I had that power and
Yeah.
I could say, does Matthew have this experience when he's 20 or does he not? Um, I would uh, I would probably say it was necessary
Mm,
for me. I mean, we did this question in the WhatsApp group we have of members,
yes.
ex-members, and some of those everyone feels very differently. It ranges from people who are still in the church to people who really felt like they were hurt in it to people who felt they wasted their life a lot of it in it. But pretty much every single person, when asked that side of question, kind of went, ultimately, I probably wouldn't change the past. I probably wouldn't go back and change that because who knows what the alternative would be. And these good things came out of it. Pretty much every single one of it. I don't think there was an exception in that small group. And my wife, I'm married to somebody who was in the church. I mean, how can I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't know you if I hadn't joined the church. It's like, so it's very difficult for me to say, no, don't do it. I think knowing what I know now, I would never encourage anybody else to go into it. Like I couldn't sit here and go join the ICOC. But having said that, uh, my best analogy is prison. I think the ICOC for me was prison, and uh, a bit like real prison. I've not been in real prison, but people go into real prison. Sometimes they get a skill, they meet people, they learn things about themselves. They deepen in their understanding of life. It can be. I've heard and read from different people who've been in prison. It can be a positive experience and good things come out of it, but it's always prison. No one ever really wants to go back to prison. No one wants anyone they love to end up in prison. But so that's kind of how I view it is like it was an important and powerful part of my life, but I can only see it as a prison, as something essentially negative. And the only other thing I was going to say about that was I regard kind of Christianity like that. So kind of like traditional Christianity, I regard as like a baptism. And the ICOC was an extreme form of that baptism, but it's like something you go through, but you're not meant to stay there.
Mm.
It's something you experience. We had it in a very extreme way in the ICOC where it was very cult-like, but I think evangelicals have it as well, this thing of like it's so rigid and so heaven and hell and fear and actually all those things are useful, but they're like part of a learning journey. So for me, the ICOC is a learning journey. And I too hurt people. So my biggest regrets are the people I hurt. I think in my dating relationships, I hurt people. I think I missed time with my family. I think the people I evangelized, I was so dismissive of them and so rude to other religious people. So all my regrets are similar to you. You know, I wasn't in a big leadership position, so I didn't have that much responsibility, but I still hurt and abused people as part of the organization and in my own personal life. So that I deeply regret and would never want to do that. I could never consciously agree to that. So on that level, I would say no. So similar to you, I guess, James, if that's the cost, I could never say because that's not a cost. I'm willing to pay my cost, but I'm not willing to pay other people's. I'm not willing to charge other people for my experience.
I hear you. I like that, and thank you for your answer. You know, our buddy Aldo has spoken on this publicly, and he's kind of made his changes too.
Mm,
I still remember when he did his podcast and announced, yes, he would do it again. But what he would do differently is when he saw his, I think it was 19-year-old self walk in to the service to get baptized that day, he would catch him on the front steps and say, now listen, you're about to embark on something that's going to be magical. It's going to help you a lot in life, but keep yourself. Don't lose yourself. You keep who you are. I'm warning you, don't fall in to do what everybody wants you to do. You keep who you are, but have a blast with your Christianity. You're going to see a lot of good changes, a lot of good things. I would warn you with that. So that was his view.
mm,
And then even months later, he told me, I've changed it now. I'm saying, no, I wouldn't do it again. Why? Because he and I were both changed, bettered for the work we're doing and the work we've done. In my case, how can I say it didn't help me? I always wanted to be a motivational speaker. I got more opportunities in the church than I ever would have had anywhere. And part of my responsibilities as an international speaker was to go to all the different countries. And a lot of Americans struggle when they go to other countries to do seminars. Not me. I love going to other countries. I'd already fallen in love with that. I'd fallen in love with the people from every country. And I look at all the ways that helped me and go, well, of course, I benefited so much. But what stops me, it was on the backs of a lot of people. And that does not sit right with me. So even though I benefited, it wasn't right for the people that were hurt. And we're talking again about the greatest disparity of how people were treated in our movement. And amazingly, it was not the people with money and the people without. The old joke was if you have enough money, that means you don't have to go on Wednesday nights. We'll give you a pass on Wednesday nights if you give enough contribution. Still need to be there on Sunday. It was kind of a joke, but it was kind of true. There were different standards. But it was more than just wealth, and it wasn't race. I love the fact that I can say that. I know I'm a white man saying that. And I'm not saying that we didn't do things that we could have done a lot better with race. But all I know is in London, our first 20 marriages, 17 of them were from two different countries. And I loved that about our church. I love that. That was so different. So it wasn't the discrepancy even between men and women. Though I've often said that's a close second place because we did treat them differently, and it's still different today. But boy, lead or non-leader, now we're getting down to it. Now we're getting down to how what was your experience like? And I know this is not going to. Some people are not going to appreciate what I'm about to say, but I've thought about it a lot, and I'm going to say it. The reason I say now no, as much as I benefited, I envision a conference, a massive conference, say, let's say in the United States, and it was the Slave Owners National Conference. And as a slave owner, I showed up with all the other slave owners, and we talked about if you could do it again, slavery, would you want it or not? Like, how was your life changed because of slavery? My life was improved incredibly. Are you kidding? Listen, I had a little farm of 9 acres. My farm now is 900 acres. And we used to only do enough food just for ourselves or a little bit in the town. Now we ship it. We are a very successful enterprise now. And that came because of slavery. Because of slavery, I was able to live in a much nicer place. I had a lot more money. I left my family a lot more money. Okay, so you really benefit. Yes. How about the guys that made it work? How about them? Would they want to do it again? Would they want to be a slave again? And this is where it got me because I thought we benefited incredibly as leaders, but off of the backs of people that are hurting today. That's where a lot of this is all coming from. It wasn't, I had a preacher call me yesterday and just say, James, you make it sound like we're the only, when I was talking about kids, you make it sound like we're the only church where a preacher messed around with one of the members. Dude, that happened in the Baptist church with you. That happened in a lot of churches. Yeah, I get it. But here's where we're different. We're not just talking about the people that were sexually abused in our church coming forward and saying this was wrong. This is the rank and file. This is the majority of non-leaders that are saying didn't like the way we were treated. And of course, we're going to be coming up to town halls in our next lesson. And there's never been greater proof. Never been greater proof of how we treated people who were not leaders than the town halls. Never. So we'll talk more about it. But would you do it again is a big, big question. And one of the quotes I like to use is the illiterate of the future will not be the man who cannot read or write, but the one who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. We've got to do some unlearning and relearning. We have cognitive dissonance leaders that have the hardest time acknowledging what I just said. I was treated so well and was given so many grand opportunities that did help me out with my future life out of the church. But at what price? At what price? So if I was going to do it again, I say no. It's not worth it for me. Too many people were harassed and abused for me, a leader, so that I could have all of this great training to have a good career. That's how I feel about it now. What about yourself?
But first of all, I just want to really appreciate your honesty, James, and your vulnerability there. I to get to the way you've got to, where you're like, wow, off the backs of these people, I got this.
Yeah.
That's where I think we all need to get to. I can't. It's definitely. I hate to point a finger, but I'm going to point a finger. It's where the leaders need to get to. I'm going to point a finger. I'm going to be blatant about it. I'm not going to put
If they could just acknowledge the same, you're saying.
Yeah, if they would, but it's taking you a long time to get there, and so I have to acknowledge, like, it's not an easy thing. So I've got to make comments on a few things you said. So that one person who said, "Listen, the Baptists did this." Okay, cool. So get up there and announce we were no different from the Catholics, the Church of England, the Jehovah Witnesses. We were all the same. There's no difference.
Yeah.
We claimed we were different. No divorces in the kingdom of God. We're the one true church. We're real disciples. Where other people just talk about the Bible, they're religious. We used to laugh at the religious. We were exactly, that's cool. That's all. Yes. That's all I'm asking. Just say that. You're saying
Preach
it
it.
in private to James.
Preach it.
You're saying it in
Yeah.
private to James. Well, the Baptist did
You're
that.
saying we're no different than all the others.
You're
We're
right.
no.
You're no different. You've nailed it on the head. You are no different.
So
But
say
say it
it.
out loud all the time. Say it out loud before every sermon. Just say, we just want to acknowledge before we
God bless you.
do the
God bless you,
sermon.
man.
We there was sexual abuse in our church. We controlled people. We financially abused people, like every other church. Now let's talk about discipleship. If that's the way you want to go, great. We're not picking on you, ICOC. Trying to help you. It's like this isn't about. I mean, it's slightly insane, James, because if you look back, it's also it is a rewriting of history as well, because we never used to go like, well, all the other churches are doing that. That wasn't
No,
our thing. Our
no,
USP was we are different from all the other churches. So that's
no.
one thing I got. It's just, I mean, it is crazy that.
That's crazy.
But the other thing is the slave ownership one. That in 2003, when everything was kicking off in London, there were a few things that people like myself and my friends, black and white friends, we would start to use. And one of the analogies was slaves, because some of the leaders were going, well, I was a kind leader. It was like, well, you mean you were a kind slave owner? It's true. There were kind slave owners and more brutal slave owners. In my
Yes.
mind already, I can think of two leaders. One
Yeah.
of I think of as brutal, the other one I think of as quite kind, but they were both leaders. And in James's analogy, which is an analogy that's been used by lots of other people as well in the church, that slave owner analogy is like, well, you were still a slave owner. That was still a dynamic. And obviously it wasn't slave ownership because we could leave. But from a psychological point of view, it's a good metaphor to use. And I understand if that metaphor upsets or
I'm
offends.
sorry. I'm challenging you when you say you could leave. I'm saying it was
Well,
easier for a slave to leave and say I might get killed than for us to leave thinking, did I just condemn myself to eternity of torture?
I mean,
It's
that's a
hard to leave. It's hard to leave.
psychological prison bars are just as
Yeah,
real as physical prison bars, if not more real. I
if
accept
not
that. And
more.
then the final thing I wanted to say, there was one other thing that triggered me that you said. So it was about the slave owner. I can't the conference, and oh yeah. So this was a conversation I had with a top leader, and I love this guy. And it's not, but we talked about. I shared my experience, and this might give because he might have used this analogy elsewhere. And before this ever goes out, I'm going to tell him that I've said this. But I shared my story, and he said it's like an elephant. It's like an elephant, and you were kind of you were at the tail of the elephant with all the crap coming down on you. Whereas I rode on top of the elephant. I was on top of the elephant, so I had a great experience. And I didn't at the time. I was like, I didn't know him that well. I didn't. But I've thought about that a lot since that when we had that conversation. We both had two different experiences of this elephant. Fair enough. The problem was the elephant was trampling over people. It wasn't like this elephant was a good thing. This elephant was trampling over people. And in fact, that very trampling over were kind of what the elephant was existing on, was trampling on the lives of people. The 900,000 people left in our wake, half of whom might have thought they were failures of Christians or going to hell, or they'd broken up their relationships, or they'd given their money. Like, this elephant was not an elephant, it was a monster. So, and the fact that you rode on top of it, you have to get to the point, and I'm not trying to go a bit like a teacher. Look what James has done. Why can't you be more like James? I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying where James has got to is the point where he's able to say, without condemning himself, without condemning anybody, just recognizing, listen, I got to ride the elephant for a long time. And I have to acknowledge that while I was riding the elephant, that elephant was trampling a lot of people, and I was benefiting.
Yeah.
That's all. And James didn't know it at the time. It's taken him 30 years to figure, and it's taken me a year. And I was quite close to the bottom, being trampled. But even I had my privileges. Like Tunde, our friend Tunde, who's passed away, who James fortunately met, who was this wonderful Nigerian woman. She would always say to me when I was moaning about the church and complaining about the church and how I was treated, she'd say, you were like friends with a lot of the top leaders. You were like, they would hang out with you. You were treated differently than I was. And it's true. She really was like, as a black woman who they didn't feel was offering enough. Tunde was right at the bottom of the pile. She didn't have any say, or I was playing backgammon with the evangelists. I was hanging out with the evangelists. I was kind of, in there. So I had a bit more kind of like, I had their ear, I had a bit of grace, I had some of the fun, you know, probably because I gave money, probably because I was a bit more educated or sharper or white, whatever it was.
We invited you up on the elephant to ride on the back occasionally
Yeah, exactly. And
to
they
help
tried to
trample
they
over some
tried to get me
others.
on the back. They did try to be fair, two or three of them really tried their best to pull me up onto the back of that elephant. And I was like, oh no, to ride in the back of the elephant, you've got to be really pure. And I'm not really pure. And they didn't say, they never said
If
to me, oh
if
no,
you
it's
only
okay.
knew, if you only knew how
But
we really live.
the truth was, you didn't have to be really pure. You just had to be willing to kind of want to enjoy riding the elephant more than, and that might feel really unfair, but there was an element of, listen, some people were like willing to sacrifice something to get on top of the elephant. And that wasn't where they started. That wasn't the reason they got baptized. That wasn't even the reason they started to get on the elephant. But once they got on top of the elephant, that was definitely part of the reason they stayed there. Because just bringing back to Alistair, our friend Alistair Mackay, who said he loved people too much to stay in the ministry. Tina was the one who told me that story, my wife. And I told her I'd shared it with you. I said, is that okay? She said, yeah, but also tell them this. When he told me that, I thought, how arrogant of him. How arrogant of Alistair to
It was
think
just
that
the
he loved too
opposite.
many
It
people.
was just it was just the opposite.
Oh, no, but let me finish because Tina wanted me to make this point. She thought, as an ordinary member, and she did go in the ministry for a little bit in Nigeria, but she thought at that time when she all her only dream was to go in the ministry was like how arrogant of him to think that he's too loving to go in the ministry. What an arrogant man! And now she looks back and thinks, oh no, man, he was just sincere and genuine. But that's how we used to think in those days. And when your
Right.
friends are saying that about the church, we have to remember what it was really like in those days. You can't rewrite history. We have to be honest about what it's like final point, and then you talk, James. Sorry. The Apostle Paul did not minimize him standing there while Stephen was being stoned and taking the clothes. He didn't minimize it. He goes, well, everybody was stoning people in those days, or, lots of religion. It's like we have to own it. If we don't own it, we can't learn from it. Anyway, that's it. You talk, James.
Beautiful, beautiful. By the way, I'm so impressed that you can remember 3 points to respond to. And seriously, seriously, I just envy that. Well, we'll close this one up.
Okay.
Would you do it again? I would say this: if you're still in the church today and you heard this lesson and your answer was no, I don't think I would do it again. That's really interesting. And some people will respond that way. And so it makes you wonder, so why are you in? If you would not get in the future, is it like, well, they've got me now because of the eternity thing, so I can't leave? Uh if you're saying, if you're still in and thinking in the future, I wouldn't do this again, I'm saying you need cognitive dissonance to keep you from walking away from the church right now, if that's what you really believe. If you had another opportunity, you'd say no. That might be your heart and your conscience telling you right now.
Do you think there are people who feel that way, James?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I want to say just, I still believe, even though I say love is God, I still believe in the creator of the universe. I basically believe Jesus was the creator of the universe. I have a very different theology, but I just want to say the truth will set you free, whether you've been in the church 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Like, if it's fear that's keeping you in, I understand that, but that is the call of faith. That is the call of like out of Egypt through the desert. That is the call of the rich young ruler. Trust me. Like we interpret these things very legalistically, but metaphysically, the truth will set you free. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the church. And all those passages about God can turn stuff from bad to good still applies. It hasn't, like the love, it hasn't gone away. So if somebody feels that way, oh, and I've wasted my life, I really believe, I believe there's a happy ending for everybody, whether in this life or the next. But if you want your happy ending sooner or your happy beginning sooner, don't let fear be the thing that stops you or kind of, oh, it's too late now, or
Ah,
it's never too late. That is the
Right.
beauty of love. Love never fails. It's never too late. Doesn't matter. This life or the next life. But if you want to get to the happy beginning, so I'm just thinking about what you said, because I'm thinking about people trapped in the ICOC for whatever reason. You don't need to be. But I would say it's not, the ICOC is never going to change. I don't think it can't. It's too,
Most people are thinking that now.
it can't because
Well,
it can't unless it because it takes individuals acknowledge it's too that cathedral stuff you talked about is too strong. The doctrine as a group think and as an institution,
it
even
is
the more
strong.
liberal parts of it, even the parts like the East or Thames Valley in England, who are very liberal, there's still so much group think, and there's just not an opportunity. There's so much fear still at the bottom of we've got to be saved. We've got to get our eternity. We've got, and that fear is always going to that fear. The battle is between fear and love. Sorry,
Would
Jeff.
you do it?
On
Would you
your
do it again? My
mm,
confession to end this topic, and it's a true confession. I am embarrassed. I'm not ashamed. I try to stay away from shaming myself, but I'm embarrassed that it took me this many years to come to this conclusion. It took me this long to realize, yeah, I could do it again and I could benefit again, but it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. I've heard too many stories. I opened my heart to listen to people that when I was a leader, I didn't listen to intently. And now I look at myself at 70 years old, coming up in a couple of months. And it took to now for me to say, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And it's because of how they were treated.